I've had this journey with God where I wanted to do everything because I received his goodness. In that moment, in a hammock, by myself, he come up here, braced me, and I was like, God, you're good. Like, this was good. I'm going to do. And that journey of doing led me to doing Bible college and then burning out by I was doing 6 days a week plus 2 times at church on a Sunday, plus then young adults, plus the Connect group. I was like, I want to do. And then I realized at the end of it that something was really missing. And I was like, I just got to go to Bible college to find out what this is that's missing. I went to Bowen, went to the Whit Sundays, was there for 5 years, and I developed the skills to help adjust my character. I developed the skills of learning, how do you do ministry? How do you actually show someone love? Right, like, I want to with everything I've got. I want to show you love. But what you're receiving is a list of instructions from me of what to do. And I'm like, it's just not making sense, because I can tell everyone, I'm like, I was changed, I was transformed, why aren't they? I'm changing, why aren't they? And then I realized I stopped changing. Why aren't they? It's my fault. And I thought I have something to do in this ownership. And the very last message I spoke in Bowen was a communion message before I said, look, I feel like God's spoken to me and I've got to go to Gatton. I know it sounds weird. I know I'm leaving the Whit Sundays, but God spoke. I can't leave it. I've got to follow it. And the message I spoke was that there was 5 frogs sitting on a log. And, 4 of them decided to jump. How many are left sitting on the log? 5 of them. Because decision and doing are 2 different things. And so that process, and I was like, we need to make sure that we follow through and we do what we say we're going to do, or we do. There's got to be an element of what we can do, because I can decide to what I'm going to do. I can decide all these things, but unless I do it, there's going to be no change. So I tell you all of this because I felt like God gave me a word for us as a collective family here. And I was like, and it just kept unpacking this week as I do it. And I was so glad that Warren was here this morning, because I'm like, man, I love the Broncos. And they've been a bit of a disappointment lately, but I still love them. And I was like, I want someone to be able to relate to this, because if I've got to explain the whole story of how football works, we'd be in a little bit of a pickle. So I was like, I'm glad that there's someone I can be like, look, it's like, Warren, you know what I'm talking about? Yeah, good. That's so we can keep going. But the thought that I had was that when you're in the stand, you're looking down at the people and they're watching him play. I don't know about you, but I always know best. I don't know if you've experienced this, particularly watching an Origin game, which, it's coming up, and I was like, I know what's happening on the 9th. But this whole concept of that, I'm watching them play a game, I know what they're doing, and I'm like, if they just would do this differently, why was he not in position? If he was just in position, then it would have worked. It's like you can see everything and you look at it from a bird's eye view and you can tell them technically what to do. And you can be a good coach if you know how to communicate that clearly, if you know how to bring that connection to that team to actually get them to do what you're asking them to do. But it's a whole other story if you put me on a field. If you put me on a field, I can run for 10 metres. I had to think then, because I was going to over-exaggerate and be like, I can run for 5 minutes. I'm like, no, I can't do that. And I was like, I can run for 10 metres. Give me 10 metres, I could one hit up. I can do that. And I could probably do that technically really well. But you see, the thing about playing on the field is that it doesn't matter what you know, it's now going to come back to what you do. And then it doesn't matter what you do, because it's going to be what you believe about yourself. Because you can have all the disciplines worked into your life and end up like the Broncos and not have any self-belief. And you see them that they can click and they miss. They fire and they miss. Or then you can have the Storm, who have so many names. You could list half the team that are out, and they still manage to win, and they manage to be in the right position at the right time, and they believe that they have the power to do something about it. And they're doing it, and they're doing it really well, which is a bit of a hassle, because I gave my pastor from Gatton a lot of slack about the Storm, and now I've got nothing but apologies and shame and guilt and all the rest when it comes to trying to have a go at someone about the Melbourne Storm. So I was like, 2015, I thought it was a great year to go and really rub it in, and then we got beat in the finals by the Cowboys. I was like, But we made the finals, unlike you, Lokes. Now look at the last 5 years. I was like, yep, time will tell. Time will tell. Humble is a good thing. But I'm saying this because this whole concept of working out how this works is you can have players, and I don't know if you've ever listened to football players sometimes, but I can listen to some of them when they do an interview, and I'm like, they're a bit simple. And it's like, don't they know? Like, don't they know how this is supposed to, like, you know, it's like, yeah, I just got to hit up, just got to keep on to it. And it's like, yeah, but what about, you know, like the plays? Like, you talk to them and it's like, how did you get there by just doing the one thing? It's like, we're talking about, like, they're NRL players, they got contracts, but you listen to them talk and I'm like, I had this idea that they would be geniuses. They would know everything about football. They would know how plays run. They understand the outworkings of, you know, how do your biomechanics work in your body and what gets you the best. Like, that's what I thought they would know, but they know nothing. They just know, well, if I get up in the morning and if I follow this disciplined process, then I'm at the level to then start doing the rest. And it got me to thinking about the correlation between church and the difference between doing church and being church. How do we be Christians? How do we be? Like, what the fundamental thing in a game is you need to take the ball forward. And one of the things I look at is like, what's the contact, like post-contact meters? What are your actual running meters? Because at the end of the day, if you're not moving the ball forward, it doesn't matter if you can get it over the try line with a somersault or a Mickey flip. Who cares how good? You need to move the ball forward. And how does that happen? That happens because of discipline. But I've realised that you've got a bunch of people in a team, and the NRL's full of them, people that were disciplined. Let's look at the positive of this. Their character has been disciplined enough that they have woken up each morning. They've decided that I'm going to choose to train. They've trained their bodies. They've trained their minds. And as a spectator, I'm thinking, oh, they must be brilliant. It's like, no, you know what? They've just been committed. There was just a commitment to discipleship. There was just a commitment to training that's taken place for that player. So you can have them as a spectator, but as a player, they're 1,000 times better. You take, you know, as a spectator, you can sit around in a room of football players and you can tell them what they should have been doing. And they'll be like, yeah. And they'll be graceful enough to listen for a period of time before they probably smack you across the head and you're like, shut up and get out. You haven't done the training. You haven't done the discipline. You haven't done the hard yards. But see, our faith then takes another step because it's not so much about reading our Bible. It's not about praying longer or praying harder or praying deeper. It's not about just believing that, you know what, it's going to be good. It's going to be good. It's going to be good. It comes down to a connection with our Father. And this connection with our Father comes about by relationship. And it's his heart. See, the thing that I kept hearing was that, you know, the Father's heart is about connection. The Father's heart is about us connecting with him in collaboration. And it's that connection in collaboration, that idea that he loves you with everything he's got. He also loves your husband with everything he's got. And he loves June with everything he's got. And he loves me with everything he's got. And he wants us with the love that we've received to allow ourselves to be transformed into his image so that we can show and shine his light. And that process, we can get it. So then I looked at this from a football sense. You can have someone that's trained, someone that's disciplined, and they will be able to run on the field. But the difference between a winning culture and a losing culture is the belief in what they're there for and how did they get there. The concept that I felt is that God has placed us in this situation for a time such as this because he's asking us to change. You're here because you're willing to change. You're willing to grow. You're not here because, well, my mum's just looking around. Yeah, no one's got their mum dragging them here and going like, oh no, there's a new song for, talking to Jesus. Have anyone heard that song? Yeah, it's the new song that's come out. It's like talking to Jesus. Like my mother told me to come to church and she made me. Now I'm talking to Jesus. And this whole process where I was like, that's so corny. But it makes sense. But I was like, okay. But I don't know. It made me angry. I don't know. Something in me was like, oh. It's like, oh, I just want to sing about Jesus. I'm like, not my mum. But this idea that, there's this process where he's had his mum take him to church, and then because he's been coming, he's developed a discipline. And out of that discipline, he's learnt that in hard times, he can fall back to that. But how much better if we just learnt to know who Jesus was and that our loving Father loves us and is there for us. And it doesn't matter whether we fail or win. The outcome is not our job. It's just the obedience to know that he loves us. It's the obedience to know that, you know what? If it doesn't work, it's okay. If the outcome isn't my favourable outcome, it's okay. It's okay. I've just got to be obedient. And so you have this element where the storm are just obedient. It's like, you know what? I might get dropped next week because we've got better players, but I'm here and I'm just going to be obedient. You've asked me to be in my position. I've just got to do my thing. They just be who they have been called to be, and they score tries. And then you've got the Broncos who go, oh, look, I was wanting to be like that, but it just got a little bit hard. I missed that tackle. Do you know how many times I've missed a tackle? Do you know how many times I've missed the mark? Do you know how many times that I've struggled with sin? Do you know how many times I've been reminded of my past failures? And that process just comes back, and you start going back to what, in the footy terms, a losing culture. But what it is really just a law culture. Because the gospel, there is only one, and it's the gospel of grace. That, at the end of the day, the only truth about the gospel is that if you simply believe that you couldn't do it, and that you can do it because of him, you can. If you simply believe that Jesus loves you, then that's all you needed to do. And outwork from that. It's like, he loves me. I've just got to listen. I've just got to do. I got to this stage in my life, and I was thinking about how I was in the pews, or I was up in the bleachers, and God called me, and he's like, come down and play. And I'm like, yeah. It's like, I've been doing this. I got all this head knowledge. And I went to Bible college, and I learnt all these things, and I got to Bowen, and I learnt, and I was like, I missed my mark, but my grandparents took me to church. I've got this legacy that I'm built on. If I just fill my head knowledge with this, it'll sink down to my heart, and I'll be right. I'm going to be a pastor in a year's time. I had it all worked out where I was going, and I knew it because I'm like, God said, here's my rules. These are the rules that I'm going to live by, and this is what God said. But then I come to Gatton broken and hurt. I wasn't broken because of anyone else's fault. I was broken because I was thinking that I could get fulfillment out of following the rules that someone put in place. You see, if we follow rules, it replaces the relationship. If I follow the rule that I will get up every morning and make my wife a cup of tea, eventually it's a rule that I'm following and not a relationship that I'm choosing to invest in and love, because I'm just going to do it. Does she feel the value in that? Because I'm like, I just get up. Doesn't matter what's happened. I'm just going to do these things. They're nice little sort of pinpointers, but I need to remember that if I'm operating from rule rather than relationship, I'm going to find myself all of a sudden disconnected and lost, tossed and turned about by every wave and every thought that comes against me. I start to doubt it and I start to question. And so as I had realized that I'd put these rules in place, like I will go to church twice a week, I will read my Bible every day, I will pray, I will do these things. And I found that the only thing that really actually made me come alive was when I was praying. Because I would pray and pray and pray and pray, and then I'd be like, I've got nothing, God. He'd be like, oh, welcome. It's nice of you to show up. And it's like, wait, what? And it's like, no, that's good. It's like, no, I can do, like, I can use what you're doing, and I'm faithful to do that, but I wanted you. And then I met my wife, and my journey with my relationship came about from, I went to Bowen, and I was like, I'm never getting married until God says, because that's what they've all said. I got there with a bunch of boys, and we're like, nah, that's it. So it became this like talk of the town of like, oh, there's these 5 boys at the church. They're all good and young, and they're just great people. And all these girls are like, yeah, like, we're like, no, we're not getting married. We're not having a relationship because that's not right. And it was all based on rule, but we're like, yeah. And we wore it as a badge that, you know what, like we can talk to you, but we don't like you. And we're like, that's how that works. And then, eventually you realize how wrong you were in the fact that in my holding up the rule of this is what we're going to do, I took complete value away from those girls. Rather than being like, look, God's spoken to me about this, and I don't know what he's speaking to you, but you're a valuable person. And, I took away, by me enforcing my rule and my little plot of land, I actually taken from other people's worth and value. I say that to say I got to Gatton. I was like, okay, I need to start doing things out of this relationship. And in that, God really worked in my heart. And I was like, this is right. It's not about what I do. It's about who God is. And I started to live out of this relationship. And all of a sudden, I found a girl that I was attracted to, my beautiful wife, Claire. And I realized that this is a give and take. And this process that took place, I was like, I think I've got it. I'm going to go and do ministry now. We're going to get married, and then we're going to go straight into ministry. And then we got married, and I realized that marriage isn't about me getting another person to do what I want to do. It's about two becoming one. And it was the most beautiful, painful experience in my life as I got to know this wonderful woman and got to find these major flaws inside of me that God was like, hey, it's like, I loved you. And I'm like, how could you love, like, do you realize what I thought when I first got married? I've been thinking about this last week, actually, that I was like, I can't believe what I thought. I remember sitting in a car on our honeymoon telling my wife, this is what we're going to do. And I was like, that is not her. Like, she's not turned on by ministry. She doesn't, like, that switch in her head doesn't flick with ministry. She just loves people. And this doesn't interest her whatsoever. But out the back does, finding that mother that's alone, finding that person that's lost. And she does all these things behind the scenes where I'm like, for some reason, I think I'm just wired to talk. And it seems better to talk at the front than at the back because you annoy a lot of people when you're talking at the back, So I was like, maybe I should gravitate towards the front, but she's gravitates towards, and it's like this perfect match of two completely opposite people coming together as one. And so I just want to pull this up a bit here because I've talked a lot just to try and get to this one point. So I thought I knew what I was doing. I feel like God's taking me down from the pew. I'm in the field. I'm running. I've got the grace of God. And then we had a moment. And this moment came about when we found out that we were pregnant with our second child, Abigail. She was diagnosed with HLHS. She had a heart condition. We found out in a lengthy time. I realised that, sometimes time, like life is short, but life is also very long. And it works in both ways. In that moment, I was like, everything's fading. Everything's fading. It's like, they're like, your daughter's going to pass away. She's going to be ill. This is what's going to happen. Basically, you either go with abortion or you can go through surgical procedures, but you need to know she doesn't have what we need to be able to make it work. So we can take from what she does have and change it, but it just won't fit. She could live, but it's at a long shot. And then when she does live, she's going to have 25% capacity. And I'm going, this is really hard. And I'm like, so it's either like, I'm like, well, that's obviously what we have to do. They're like, there is a third option. The third option is you just get to care for her. She'll be born. You can have her for a short period of time and she will pass away naturally. And we had to go through this process of, okay, so we're sitting there and the doctors have told us we've had specialist after specialist. In the space of about 3 hours, everything's come to light. And we're told, okay, you can go to our national conference, go to state conference. Let us know on Monday what your thoughts are. Or on a couple of days, we'll give you some time to think and talk about it. That car trip with my wife was one of the longest, most confusing trips of my life. Because I had to work out, how do I do life with my wife and how do I hear from God for both of us? And she's doing the same thing where you're going, what if we're missing? What if God's saying different things to us? And we were both so fearful of how do we address this? By that night, we'd spoken about it and we found that we both, laying in bed after going, life's good, this is Emmanuel, let's go to conference, let's just pretend like everything's fine. We'll talk about everything but that. And we're laying in bed and we both says, look, I feel like we're supposed to take this palliative care option. And we both were like, yeah. And it was this realization and this journey that, we decided that we were going to jump off this log, but now we had to do it. We now had to go through this journey. We had to walk the path. We had to then go, well, okay, we've decided this, but then we found that we are deciding for our girl, but we've now got to then take this thing that's birthed within us, this decision that was birthed within us, this thing where God has spoken to us, and we've now got to carry this through. And we're like, God, we're going to pray for a miracle. We're going to believe for her to be healed. And I was like, I'm going to pray. And so we prayed. And I wept. Where I'm like, God just said he's taking her home. I was like, that doesn't make sense. Like, God's good. And I know you're good, God, but now I had to hold on to that. I had to go, well, no, I believe who I am. I believe the message of grace. But you've told me you're going to take her home. And I went to my wife thinking, how do I tell her this? And she comes to me and she's like, God's told me he's taking her home. We're like, oh, I'm glad we're talking to the same bloke. It didn't make it much easier, but to know that you're doing it together, to know that I can trust my wife's relationship with God, to know that God can be trusted with the hard answers. And so we took this journey. We had a lot of pressure from people that not willingly doing it on purpose, but would ask those questions of why. Did they really say that? Did God really say this? Don't you know God is good? I'm like, he is good. Well, he wouldn't let her die. It's like, no, I believe that God for a time has assigned a time for her life. And we believe with everything in our hearts that if God has said that, God has said that. But God is also more than capable of healing her condition. She needs a new heart. She needs a whole half of her heart to be created. And I'm like, and if that's the case, then we're going to believe in this process. And we're going to believe that God can do it. So each night I'd be like, God, if it's your will, let it be, but please create a new heart in her. Create a new heart in her. And I saw our whole community soften, change, mold as they saw us wrestling, confused as they were, frustrated, to be like, you should be doing this, you should be doing that, you should be doing this, you must do this, you must do that. We're like, no, we just need to follow what God has spoken to us about. We just need to walk this out. And in that time, it went forever. It was such a long process. 3 months has never gone for so long. But then this last year has never gone so quick. She was born and they're like, okay, look, she's going to be born, she's going to be unhealthy, she's going to be really sick. She's born and she's fabulous. Everything about her, like, oh, she's really strong. She's lifting her head. She's come 3 weeks early and there's nothing we can really falter on. We can hear that her heart isn't right, but nothing is responding accordingly. We didn't think this was going to happen. To the point that a week later, they're like, do you think we could take more tests? Because we think maybe we've made a, we can hear that the heart's not right, but something's gone wrong. About 2 days later, it happened to be my birthday, she started to get ill. Basically, with the condition, it starves her body from oxygen because the heart wasn't able to pump the blood. So the blood wasn't going through and out and in. So basically, she just begins to suffocate. And in this process, we've seen everything go fantastically well, right up to the point where we were able to administer the medication to keep her peaceful, to allow her to rest in peace. And at 11:26, she passed away in my arms. And at this moment, it was a mix of relief, joy, and sadness all in one. And the very first words I felt God say was, well done. And I was like, well done? It's like, that's not what you think when you... So my daughter's just passed away. And it hurt. But there was this amazing peace and this presence that in this situation that seemed so painful, And for a lot of people so hopeless, we were able to stay strong because it was just us resting in his plan and perfect will. I say this, that God's asking us to play the game. And he's not someone that's asking you to play the game while he sits up in the stands. He's been right there with us the whole way. This journey has not been alone. This journey has not been without its challenges, but the truth about God is he's always there. He's always speaking, and he loves you. He loved us before when I thought I knew what I was doing. But when he asked me to change, it wasn't, you've done the wrong thing. It was like, no, you were there. I love you. It's like, let's try something different, but you just need to know that it's okay. I know you've been doing it this other way. I've got something else for you. And I felt like this morning that God was saying he's got something else for you. He's got something else he wants to take you through. I don't know your personal situations, your personal pain, or your circumstances, but I do know the God that loves you and is wanting to walk with you. That he just wants your ability to walk in obedience. And that comes purely from his gift. We've done all this with him, by no means on our own. That's left us in this sort of weird strait where I can't try anymore because it's sort of an embarrassment for me to try. Like, I want to tell you about, you do this, and I want to boast in all these things, but the only thing I can boast in is God's goodness. I particularly felt that God was saying that Galatians 5:22, that the fruit of the Spirit is what he's bringing in this season. That his goodness, a revelation of his fruit bearing in your life, of patience and kindness. And it sounds so pretty, but when you're on that field, it's anything but pretty. But he's at work in you. He's doing a good work. He's in love with you. He is proud of you. He's proud of what you've done, where you are, where you're going. He knows everything about you, and yet he still chooses and accepts you. Do you mind if I pray for you guys right now?